Did you feel the world shift? Have you ever experienced that strange sensation when someone dies and suddenly an entire chapter of cultural history seems to close forever? Number 11, David Bowie, 1947 to 2016. How do you measure the impact of a man who wasn't just a musician, but a living, breathing work of art? When David Bowie passed away from cancer on January 10, 2016, just 2 days after his 69th birthday and the release of his final album Black Star, the world collectively gasped. This wasn't just the death of a rock star, it was the end of an era of boundless artistic reinvention. Bowie's career spanned nearly 5 decades, during which he constantly transformed himself. From Ziggy Stardust to the Thin White Duke, from the suited soul singer of Young Americans to the avant-garde experimenter who retreated to Berlin, Bowie refused to be pinned down. His chameleonic presence challenged ideas about gender, sexuality, and identity long before such conversations entered the mainstream. His influence extended far beyond music into fashion, film, and art. Bowie's final act, turning his own death into a carefully orchestrated artistic statement with Black Star, showed his genius until the very end. The video for Lazarus, featuring Bowie in a hospital bed with buttons over his eyes, became a haunting farewell message only fully understood after his death. Fellow musicians, actors, and fans worldwide mourned not just the man, but the permission he gave everyone to be weird, different, and completely themselves. As the tributes poured in, it became clear that Bowie's death marked the end of a time when pop stars weren't just entertainers but cultural revolutionaries who could completely reinvent themselves while staying relevant decade after decade. Number 10, Prince, 1958 to 2016. Can a color ever belong to one person? When Prince died on April 21, 2016, just months after Bowie, the color purple seemed to temporarily belong to grief. The musical genius from Minneapolis was found unresponsive in an elevator at his Paisley Park estate, dead at just 57 from an accidental fentanyl overdose. Prince Rogers Nelson defied categorization throughout his 4-decade career. He mastered dozens of instruments, wrote countless songs not just for himself but for other artists, and created a musical style entirely his own, a fusion of funk, rock, R&B, and pop that somehow sounded like nothing and everyone at once. He could make a guitar weep one moment and scream with joy the next. His battles with record labels became legendary, at one point changing his name to an unpronounceable symbol and writing "slave" on his face to protest his contractual obligations. Prince championed artistic control in an industry that typically prioritized corporate interests over creative freedom. Prince's live performances were the stuff of legend, from his Super Bowl halftime show performed in pouring rain to secret late-night jam sessions that would stretch until dawn. His fashion sense was equally bold, embracing ruffled shirts, high heels, and an unabashed blurring of gender norms before such expressions were widely accepted. His death represented the end of an era of true musical innovation and boundary pushing. In an age of focus groups and algorithm-driven music production, Prince remained a genuine musical maverick whose work was uniquely his own. Buildings across the world were lit in purple as fans gathered to mourn not just an artist, but a revolutionary who changed what was possible in popular music. Number 9, Muhammad Ali, 1942 to 2016. When was the last time an athlete transcended sports to become a global symbol of principle and courage? Muhammad Ali, born Cassius Clay, died on June 3, 2016, after a long battle with Parkinson's disease, closing the chapter on perhaps the most significant athlete activist in American history. Ali wasn't just the greatest boxer of his generation, he was a poet, a provocateur, a political figure, and for many, a prophet. His speed in the ring was matched only by his quick wit outside it. "Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee" wasn't just a catchphrase but a perfect description of both his boxing style and his approach to public life. When he refused to be drafted into the Vietnam War in 1967, citing his religious beliefs as a Muslim and his opposition to American foreign policy, Ali didn't just risk his career, he put everything on the line for his principles. "I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong," he famously said. "No Viet Cong ever called me ends." Stripped of his heavyweight title and banned from boxing during what should have been his prime years, Ali stood firm. His comeback culminated in the legendary Rumble in the Jungle against George Foreman in Zaire and the brutal Thrilla in Manila against Joe Frazier, fights that transcended sport to become cultural touchstones. Ali's courage extended beyond the ring as he battled Parkinson's disease for 3 decades, never hiding from public view even as the illness robbed him of his voice and his famous physical grace. His death marked the end of an era when athletes weren't just entertainers but voices of moral authority who could change public opinion on war, religion, and race. In today's carefully managed world of sports, where endorsement deals often take precedence over principle, Ali's absolute commitment to his beliefs feels like something from another time. Number 8. Steve Jobs, 1955 to 2011. Have you ever watched the world change through a rectangle of glass and aluminum? When Steve Jobs died of pancreatic cancer on October 5, 2011, people around the globe received the news on the very devices he had helped create. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Jobs wasn't just a tech CEO, he was the high priest of personal technology who transformed multiple industries through sheer force of vision and an uncompromising pursuit of perfection. The college dropout who once traveled to India seeking spiritual enlightenment would later bring a Zen-like simplicity to consumer technology that changed how we interact with the world. His career had the structure of a classic hero's journey. After co-founding Apple with Steve Wozniak, he was ousted from his own company in 1985. During his exile, he created Ni XD Computer and transformed Pixar into an animation powerhouse. His triumphant return to a floundering Apple in 1997 set the stage for one of the greatest business comebacks in history. Under his second tenure, Apple introduced a series of revolutionary products: the iMac, iPod, iPhone, and iPad. Each device wasn't just successful, it fundamentally altered its industry. The iPhone, in particular, created an entirely new relationship between humans and technology, placing the internet and countless applications in our pockets. Jobs' famous product presentations became cultural events. Clad in his uniform of black turtleneck, jeans, and sneakers, he would unveil Apple's latest creation with the flair of a magician pulling back the curtain. "One more thing," he would say, before revealing something that would change daily life for millions. His death marked the end of the era of the tech visionary, someone who didn't just follow market research but created products people didn't even know they needed. In today's tech landscape dominated by data analysis and incremental improvements, Jobs' intuitive approach to technology and design remains unique. The question lingers, will we ever see another tech leader who combines artistic sensibility, technical understanding, and pure showmanship the way Jobs did? Number 7. Michael Jackson, 1958 to 2009. How does a boy who never had a childhood become the world's most famous entertainer? When Michael Jackson died suddenly on June 25, 2009, from a propofol overdose administered by his personal physician, the collective shock transcended national borders, musical tastes, and generations. Jackson's journey from the precocious lead singer of the Jackson 5 to the king of pop was unprecedented. Thrust into the spotlight at age 5, he never experienced normal childhood. Instead, he performed under the strict and sometimes abusive guidance of his father, Joseph. This early trauma would shape both his artistic brilliance and his troubled personal life. His 1982 album, Thriller, remains the best-selling album of all time, transforming music videos from promotional clips into short films with narratives, special effects, and choreography that influenced generations of artists. The moonwalk, first performed during Billie Jean on the Motown 25 television special, became instantly iconic, a dance move recognized worldwide. Jackson's cultural impact extended beyond music. He broke racial barriers on MTV when the network was reluctant to play videos by Black artists. His humanitarian efforts included co-writing "We Are the World" to raise money for African famine relief. His fashion choices, the single glove, the military jackets, the penny loafers with white socks, were copied around the globe. Yet his later years were marked by controversy, including allegations of child sexual abuse, increasingly eccentric behavior, and dramatic changes to his appearance through plastic surgery. The contradictions between his childlike public persona and his complex, troubled private life fascinated and disturbed the public. His death marked the end of the monoculture in popular music, the era when one artist could capture the world's attention across demographics and geography. In today's fragmented media landscape, it's difficult to imagine any performer achieving the universal recognition and influence that Jackson commanded at his peak. The sold-out comeback tour that never happened, "This Is It," became a fitting epitaph for an entertainer whose life was defined by anticipation and spectacle. Number 6. Heath Ledger, 1979 to 2008. What happens when an actor disappears so completely into a role that it might have contributed to his death? When Heath Ledger was found dead from an accidental prescription drug overdose on January 22, 2008, he was just 28 years old and had recently completed filming his role as the Joker in The Dark Knight, a performance so intense and disturbing that many wondered if it had affected his mental health. The Australian actor had risen from teen heartthrob to respected performer through a series of carefully chosen roles. His breakthrough in 10 Things I Hate About You could have typecast him as simply another handsome leading man, but Ledger consistently sought challenging parts that showcased his range. His portrayal of a gay cowboy in Brokeback Mountain earned him an Academy Award nomination and demonstrated his willingness to take risks in an industry often hostile to such choices. Director Ang Lee described his performance as a heartbreaking display of repression and longing that transcended simple characterization. But it was his performance as the Joker that would define his legacy. Ledger locked himself in a hotel room for weeks to develop the character, creating a disturbing journal filled with thoughts and images that helped him access the villain's chaotic mindset. The result was a portrayal of anarchy and nihilism, so convincing that it redefined what was possible in a superhero film. Ledger's posthumous Oscar for the role became a bittersweet acknowledgement of talent cut short. The fact that he never saw the completed film or witnessed the public's reaction to his revolutionary performance added to the tragedy. His death marked the end of a tradition of total immersion method acting without proper psychological safeguards, raising uncomfortable questions about the cost of great art on the artist. In the years since, Hollywood has become more conscious about the mental health of performers, particularly when they take on psychologically demanding roles. Ledger's death forced the industry to confront the potentially devastating consequences of asking actors to inhabit deeply troubled characters without adequate support. Number 5. Princess Diana, 1961 to 1997. Can a single car crash in a Paris tunnel change the British monarchy forever? When Princess Diana died on August 31, 1997, pursued by paparazzi through the streets of Paris, the public reaction was unprecedented. The collective grief that swept across Britain and the world forced the traditionally stoic royal family to adapt to a new era of emotional openness. Diana Spencer was just 20 years old when she married Prince Charles in 1981 in what was billed as a fairy tale wedding watched by 750 million people worldwide. The shy kindergarten teacher transformed overnight into the people's princess, but the fairy tale quickly unraveled. Behind the scenes, Charles' continuing relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles created a triangle that Diana later summarized with the heartbreaking observation, "There were 3 of us in this marriage." What made Diana revolutionary was her refusal to play by traditional royal rules. She spoke openly about her struggles with bulimia and depression at a time when mental health was rarely discussed publicly. She touched AIDS patients without gloves when the disease was still deeply stigmatized. She campaigned against landmines, walking through partially cleared minefields in Angola and Bosnia to bring attention to their devastating impact. Her approach to motherhood also broke with royal tradition. Rather than leaving Prince William and Prince Harry primarily in the care of nannies, she took them to theme parks, McDonald's, and homeless shelters, determined to give them experiences outside the palace walls. "I want them to have an understanding of people's emotions, people's insecurities, people's distress, and people's hopes and dreams," she explained. Diana's death prompted a crisis for the monarchy. Queen Elizabeth II's initial reluctance to return to London from Balmoral or to fly the flag at Buckingham Palace at half-mast was met with public anger. The sea of flowers outside Kensington Palace grew into a spontaneous memorial as ordinary people mourned a woman they had never met but felt they knew intimately. Her funeral marked the end of the era of royal distance and emotional restraint. The sight of young Princes William and Harry walking behind their mother's coffin, the card addressed to Mummy on top of the casket, and Elton John performing Candle in the Wind created a new template for public grieving. The monarchy would never again be able to hide behind tradition and protocol. Diana had permanently humanized an institution that had previously valued dignity over relatability. Number 4. John Lennon, 1940 to 1980. How does the sound of 5 gunshots change music history forever? When John Lennon was murdered outside his New York apartment building on December 8, 1980, by a deranged fan, the dream of the 1960s counterculture died with him. The man who had imagined a world with nothing to kill or die for became a martyr to senseless violence. As a founding member of the Beatles, Lennon helped create the soundtrack for a generation. The band's evolution from the mop-top performers of I Wanna Hold Your Hand to the experimental artists behind Strawberry Fields Forever paralleled the rapid cultural changes of the 1960s. Lennon's sharp wit, political awareness, and willingness to experiment made him the intellectual center of the group. After the Beatles' breakup in 1970, Lennon embarked on a solo career marked by raw honesty. Songs like Mother confronted his painful childhood, while Jealous Guy acknowledged his personal failings. His relationship with Yoko Ono pushed him toward avant-garde art and radical politics, resulting in protest anthems like Give Peace a Chance and Happy Christmas, War is Over. His activism made him a target of the Nixon administration, which attempted to deport him as a dangerous subversive. After a lengthy legal battle, he received his green card in 1976. Ironically, Lennon's murder came during a period of personal contentment and renewed creativity. After a 5-year hiatus from music to raise his son Sean, he had just released the album Double Fantasy with Ono. The shock of his death reverberated globally. Spontaneous gatherings of mourners sang Beatles songs in parks and public spaces from Liverpool to Tokyo. The crater left by his absence seemed to mark not just the loss of a brilliant artist, but the definitive end of the optimism that had characterized the previous decades. Lennon's death marked the end of an era when rock musicians were seen as prophetic voices who could change society. In the more cynical, fragmented decades that followed, no musical figure would attain the same combination of artistic brilliance, cultural significance, and political influence. The man who asked us to imagine all the people living life in peace became a symbol of how far that reality remained. Number 3. Elvis Presley, 1935 to 1977. What happens when the boy who broke all the rules becomes a prisoner of his own success? When Elvis Presley was found dead on his bathroom floor on August 16, 1977, at the age of 42, the shocking news obscured a tragic reality. The king of rock and roll had been spiritually dying for years, trapped in a gilded cage of fame, addiction, and exploitation. Elvis erupted into American culture in the mid-1950s like a force of nature. His synthesis of country, gospel, and rhythm and blues, combined with sexually charged performances that scandalized adults, created the template for rock and roll rebellion. Television hosts filmed him from the waist up to hide his provocative hip movements, unwittingly contributing to his mystique. His career survived 2 years of military service, a detour through formulaic Hollywood movies, and the British invasion that temporarily made his music seem quaint. His 1968 comeback special revealed an artist still capable of raw, powerful performances, leading to a creative renaissance with records like Suspicious Minds and triumphant Las Vegas residencies. But beneath the jumpsuited exterior of 1970s Elvis was a deeply troubled man. Prescription drug addiction, enabled by his personal physician, Dr. Nick, contributed to increasingly erratic behavior and declining health. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, later revealed to be an illegal immigrant from the Netherlands named Andreas van Kuijk, kept him on a punishing schedule of performances while limiting his artistic growth. Elvis never performed outside North America despite his global popularity, likely because Parker feared he wouldn't be allowed back into the US if his true identity were discovered at international borders. The man who had integrated black musical influences into mainstream American culture became isolated in his Graceland mansion, surrounded by the sycophantic Memphis Mafia, who rarely challenged his self-destructive behaviors. His death marked the end of rock and roll's innocence. The post-mortem revelations about his drug use, health problems, and exploitation created a new awareness of the dark side of fame. Every rock star who died young in the decades that followed, from Kurt Cobain to Amy Winehouse, would be measured against the cautionary tale of Elvis. The man who had once represented youthful rebellion became a complex symbol of how the entertainment industry could simultaneously elevate and destroy its brightest stars. Number 2. Martin Luther King Jr., 1929 to 1968. Can a single bullet halt the march toward justice? When Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis on April 4, 1968, the civil rights movement lost its most eloquent voice, and the nation lost its moral compass during one of the most turbulent periods in American history. King's journey from Baptist preacher to global icon of nonviolent resistance happened with astonishing speed. Thrust into leadership during the Montgomery bus boycott at just 26 years old, he combined Christian principles, Gandhian tactics, and soaring oratory to challenge America to live up to its founding ideals. His approach was revolutionary in its restraint. While facing fire hoses, police dogs, death threats, and imprisonment, King insisted that moral force could overcome physical force. "We must meet hate with love," he maintained, even as his own home was bombed and his family threatened. This commitment to nonviolence earned him the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964 at the age of 35, the youngest recipient at that time. King's vision expanded beyond racial segregation to encompass economic justice and opposition to the Vietnam War. His final campaign in Memphis supported striking sanitation workers demanding better pay and working conditions. This broader critique of American capitalism and militarism made him increasingly controversial, even among former allies. In the hours after his assassination, riots erupted in more than 100 cities across America. The nonviolent movement he had led with such discipline seemed to shatter with his death. While significant civil rights legislation had already passed, including the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, King's more comprehensive vision of equality remained unfulfilled. His death marked the end of an era of optimism about America's racial progress and the possibility of peaceful transformation. The movements that followed, from Black Power to today's Black Lives Matter, would struggle with the tension between King's principles and the frustration of continued injustice. His famous "I Have a Dream" speech became simultaneously a national touchstone and a reminder of how far the country remained from his vision of a society where people will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Number 1. Marilyn Monroe, 1926 to 1962. How does a woman become an icon and lose herself in the process? When Marilyn Monroe was found dead in her Brentwood home on August 5, 1962, from a barbiturate overdose, the bombshell who had symbolized American sexuality and innocence simultaneously became frozen in time at 36, eternally beautiful, eternally troubled. Born Norma Jean Mortensen in Los Angeles, Monroe's early life was marked by foster homes, an absent father, and a mother with severe mental health problems. Her transformation into Marilyn, the breathy-voiced blonde who seemed to glow on camera, was a deliberate creation, but one that ultimately consumed her. Her film career showcased both her comedic talents in movies like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and Some Like It Hot, and her dramatic abilities in Bus Stop and The Misfits. Despite this range, she found herself typecast as the beautiful but dim-witted blonde, a characterization that deeply frustrated the intelligent woman who read Dostoevsky and aspired to serious roles. Monroe's personal life became public spectacle. Her marriages to baseball legend Joe DiMaggio and playwright Arthur Miller captivated the public but ended in divorce. Her rumored affairs with both President John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert added political dimensions to her already complicated image. Behind the scenes, she struggled with insomnia, addiction, and what would now likely be diagnosed as borderline personality disorder. Her death unleashed decades of conspiracy theories, yet the most likely explanation, accidental or intentional overdose, reflected the reality of a woman who had been prescribed a dangerous cocktail of medications by doctors more interested in keeping a star functional than healthy. The empty champagne bottle and pill containers found near her bed painted a lonely portrait at odds with her public image. Monroe's death marked the end of Hollywood's manufactured innocence. The studio system that had created and controlled stars was already crumbling, and her passing accelerated a new era of more authentic, method-driven acting. The pristine, carefully managed celebrity image gave way to acknowledgement of human complexity and frailty. She remains perhaps the most recognized female icon of the 20th century, her image reproduced on everything from T-shirts to coffee mugs to dorm room posters. Yet the gap between Marilyn, the symbol, and the real woman who created her continues to fascinate. In death, she became the ultimate blank canvas onto which each generation projects its own ideas about fame, beauty, power, and vulnerability. In the decades since her passing, have we actually come any closer to understanding the woman behind the platinum hair and famous smile?